Garden Gurus Live is brought to you by Garden Express and Troforte. Garden Express are Australia's leading mail ordering service, offering a wide range of quality gardening products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show, you jump online and visit their website.
Troforte is the leading supplier of controlled release fertilisers and micronutrients, and it's committed to delivering environmentally friendly solutions for your garden. Each week we'll be giving away a Troforte prize pack valued at $250. Simply follow, like and comment the weekly code word on Troforte's Facebook page.
Well, good morning. Hello. Welcome to the Garden Gurus Live. I'm Trevor Cochrane. We've got a fantastic program for you today. Of course, it's all about answering your gardening questions, so make sure you're getting them into us. There will be a couple of great prizes coming up. We're giving away an amazing gift pack from Troforte valued at $250. This will be all the fertiliser your garden needs for the next 12 months. It's absolutely brilliant. All you have to do is listen out for the code word. Go to the Troforte Facebook page and like it and put in the code word, of course, and you'll be in the running. So it's a pretty good one. Don't forget, of course, our great friends from Garden Express will be joining us. I think I've got Rowan with me this morning, and he also has put up a $50 gift voucher for you to go shopping. So it's the best question. Now, when it gets down to questions, please make sure that you do me a big favour. Tell me where you're from. It's really important. So state and ideally city. It does make a big difference sometimes whether you're inland or whether you're on the coast and things like that. So please give me as much feedback as you can. And of course, if it's something where you're sort of describing something and you're finding it difficult to adequately describe it, then don't hesitate to send us a photograph, and there are a few of those already coming through. We've got a bit going on, so let's get moving. We'll go straight to my mate Rowan. So let's have a look. Rowan, there he is.
Very good.
It's great to have you join us again this morning, mate. It's been a busy time for you guys. You've had a lot going on with the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. And then a lot of that new product stuff as we come into the new season. So a lot of fruit trees, a lot of roses, they're all flowing through now, aren't they?
There's a lot going on around here. So we just finished up, obviously, the bulb season, although just before we get started on everything else, there's a couple of mystery boxes left that people can grab at the moment. There's one for $15, and I think there's 8 or 9 packets of bulbs in that, so it's really, really good value. And one for $20, which has also got one of our hyacinth vases in it. So not very many left. They will be gone today, so if anybody is looking for spring bulbs, this is
I'm still planting the ones that I got off you, mate. We're progressively rolling them out, and so it's not too late. In fact, it's the perfect time to get them into the ground. So
it's absolutely perfect time. Mother's Day is a really good indication of when they should be going in the ground. For us over here in Victoria, I'm not too sure if you could probably be a little bit later over there in the west. Mother's Day
all over the country. It's been a little bit cooler too, so we certainly have had a reasonable autumn pretty much everywhere. So anybody planting bulbs, now's the time to get them in. This is your last chance for those. We'll talk about roses in the future, but this is the time for deciduous, or for bare-rooted roses is probably the best way to describe it. Most importantly, this is the time of the year to be getting citrus into the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect time for citrus into the ground, and we've got some fantastic dwarf varieties for all of those viewers that maybe don't have massive backyards or even on a balcony or in an apartment building. These are ideal.
Rowan, the thing I've noticed in my garden is I have a lot of room, but I large pot, and secondly, they're also the perfect one for anybody who just has a small garden and just would like some variety. And you've got a lot of variety in this collection of yours. So there's a dwarf blood orange, calamondins, which are like a kumquat. There's Emperor Mandarin, Eureka Lemon, Maya Lemon, Valencia Orange, pretty much everything that anybody would really want to have. You've also got what have we got? Kaffir limes, Ray Ruby grapefruit, and Valencia seedling oranges. They're obviously the larger size ones. What's the deal with these, mate? They're in a 10-litre bag. You guys, are you going to do something special for Garden Guru viewers?
Yeah, so normally they're $68 in the 10-litre pot. So a 10-litre bag. I've actually got a dwarf mandarin here. So some of them will actually come in the 10 litres, and some of them will come in these large 4-litre square pots. But that's kind of the quality of plant that we're looking at. So normally $68. We're going to put them out for viewers at just $54.40 for all of those varieties.
That's a huge discount, about 20% or something.
Yeah, 20% off, which is really, really, really good. So and this year we've got that blood orange that you mentioned, which is something that we haven't had before, and that's a real beauty for anyone that loves blood orange.
Well, this is the thing is these are they're wonderful plants because they are nice compact plants, and to put it into context, they're grafted onto these root systems that very much just dwarf the size of the tree. So you get a normal tree, normal shape and everything else, but you're only talking 1.5, maybe 2 meters maximum height, with a spread sort of a similar sort of area depending on where you're growing. So really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And full size fruit, of course.
Yeah, and that's right. Yeah, that's the only thing that's dwarf is the size of the tree. And as I said to you, one of the challenges is what do you do with all this fruit when you're getting it? 150 fruit is a lot of fruit. So that's can be quite a challenge. But in this day and age, a lot of people are getting into drying their fruit. So they'll slice the oranges and the lemons and so dry them. You can do that simply in the oven, in a tray in the oven, if you want to dry them quite quickly. And just have them on basically the lowest possible temperature, but just nice and warm, and they'll dry out within sort of a few hours. Then pop them into a jar, and then every time you've got cocktails, every time you've got a little bit of dressing for a dessert or something like that, you've got them on hand, and it does extend the season as well. So when you've run out of fresh fruit, there's always the preserved fruit afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. We never have too much trouble getting rid of our fruit. Neighbours are all over our citrus trees.
Look, mate, it's a great deal. Now, the big thing with Garden Express, and I know we talk about it week in, week out, but it is this fact that you're just so accessible.
Exactly. So 24 hours a day, you can jump on, you can shop for all your favourites online at gardenexpress.com.au. Obviously, we pack it up, get it out to you, deliver it directly to your door. It couldn't be easier.
And that's probably a really important thing to remember, is that it is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You guys, you seem to be working like Trojans out there all the time when it comes to these deliveries. There's people moving orders out constantly, and this obviously means that people within a couple of weeks of placing an order generally going to have it land on their doorstep, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are seasonal, as we've spoken about many a time. So we're out of one season into the next, and so there's always a hive of activity around the premises here. Obviously, this week we've got all that fantastic dwarf citrus, but we've also kicked off our bare root rose season, which we briefly touched on before. So they're actually starting to sell very quickly. So as with everything these days, jump on.
Or check out the website, because it's not just those. There are a lot of things that are quite seasonal. And obviously you mentioned also one last bite at the mystery bulb collection as well. So, mate, thanks so much for joining us. We have got so many questions coming in. There's a lot of people talking about fruit in particular. So we'll address that. What I should say is that when you look at the value of this, $54, I've just been having a look at the price of citrus at the moment in stores. Doesn't take long for a tree, probably year 2, and it's paid itself off. It's a pretty good return on investment. And of course, citrus looks so good as well.
Yeah, it is a good investment. So well worth putting them in. There's still a few of the apples and dwarf stone fruit and stuff that we had last week as well. So there's still a bit of that online. So while we're talking fruit,
now's the time for getting fruit into the ground. Even things like avocados, like we talked last week. Really, really good time of the year to be getting them going, mate. I need to get moving because we've got so many questions coming through. Thanks, Ryan, for joining us, folks. Remember, gardenexpress.com.au. 24/7, and they deliver direct to your door. Doesn't get any better than that. Thanks for your support, mate.
Always a pleasure, mate. Look forward to catching up next week.
Now, let me fly into these questions because they are coming through thick and fast. Megan Smith, we're not sure where you're from, Megan. With all the interest in home-grown produce, is it worth growing an avocado tree from seed? How long before you say get a Hass tree to fruit when grown from seed? So there's two things. Yes, they'll grow very well. Generally, they take quite a few years, so up to about 7 years before they'll produce fruit. That's just to be aware. Very cheap to grow them from seed. There is one possible issue, and that is that you do get variation. So when you're growing from seed, that's the product of two parents, and they're not necessarily going to be true to the original form. So you might have got a Hass fruit, but next time it may not be exactly the same. It might vary slightly. Generally, you'll still end up with a very good quality fruit, but just be aware that it's a bit of a lottery. Sometimes it can vary, which is why going for grafted trees is always a guarantee that you'll be true to form with regards to the type of fruit you got. I nearly picked avocados this morning to bring them in because it was a case of trying to choose from my favourite fruit, and it wasn't an easy thing to do. But I've got a couple of different ones for you with my plant of the week a bit later on in this morning's show. And you will have seen the photograph, hopefully, online on the Facebook page of what it is I have in my hand. I'd love to see whether you can guess what they are because not everybody knows them. Okay, Tahani Gorda, where are you from, Tahani? You're in Perth, okay. Is there an easier way to get this out of my garden other than try and dig it out? It's the orange flowered trumpet vine. Now, most people would kill to be able to get it, yet alone worry about getting it out of the garden. Typically, it's not an overly difficult plant to get rid of. It actually, it really probably looks like something where you just tear the root system out because the classic orange flowering trumpet vine, Pyrostegyia ignea, is a very interesting plant. It does take a bit to get it going, and once it gets going, it's pretty strong. But yeah, it can be quite difficult to grow. So you've got an interesting problem there in Perth with that particular one. Carolyn Lothian, now I know you come to us every week, and I'm trying to remember where you're from, Carolyn, but it's not mentioned here in this particular note from you. So let us know. But you've asked, what question should you ask if you're looking at getting a landscaping company in to do some work? Well, it's really a few things. One is, what's the type of garden you've got and what sort of plants do you like? Now, once you've kind of established that, and the best thing to do is to be, grabbing things, heading to Pinterest and grabbing things that you really like from there. That really does make a big difference. The thing with it is you need to talk about things like earthworks, depending on your soil type, and this is why it's important you tell me where you're from. If you've got heavy soils, drainage is an important issue, and sometimes when you're looking at very poor quality soils, soil enrichment is also an issue. And when you're looking at the bill that comes in, when they quote you, a lot of the time you might look at it and go, well, look, there's $1,000 worth of plants there, but I've got a $3,000 bill, and that's because there's irrigation to go in. There could be garden lighting. There could be a lot of drainage, a lot of soil improvement. You could be putting clays in. So there's a lot of questions that you should talk about. But most important thing with any landscape project, outside of the structures that they're going to build, is to talk about the soil. So getting the healthiest soil is vitally important, and I can't stress it enough. You really do need to think about that. That is something that is the difference between a really successful garden and an average garden. And often landscape companies are really good at building things, rolling turf out, doing stuff like that, not necessarily the soil work. So make sure you're talking about that critical critical point. Okay, Vinette Ainsberg, you're in Balladura, so it was back here in WA. My seedlings are being decimated by slaters. Now, what could I do to stop this from happening? Okay, slaters are also known as wood lice. So I think most people in the country will have seen them in their gardens because they're fairly common. They're, interestingly enough, not an insect as such. They're actually a crustacean. So they're related to prawns and crayfish and things like that, but of course land-based. Now, what they eat is really interesting here because they don't like eating green. They much prefer to be eating dry matter, so dead material that's rotting away, and they convert that into fertilizer and improve your soil. But when there's not enough of that, what happens is they start to go to very soft tissue green things. So seedlings are a prime target, and you will see them getting knocked around. Now, there's two things you can do. One is you can spray, and probably liquid copper kind of spray is going to be one of the most effective ways to hold them back. So copper, they don't like it an awful lot, and it will repel them and it will control them to some extent. The truth of the matter is that they're looking for food. And so you can do two things. You can do things like squeezed orange halves or lemon halves, laid down on the ground, come back out about 6:30 when it's dark. They will move over, they'll get in underneath it, and they'll be eating away at all that material that's going to rot away. And you can collect that then and reduce your population down. So that's one way to go. Or you can just mulch and use a lot of organic, so very organic mulch, not a soil conditioner, but a real proper chunky mulch. And they will eat that in preference to eating your seedlings. So maybe that's a way to go. There's a few different options there. Tyson Sanders, you are in Victoria, you're in Baronia, and you write to us every week. And I would love to have a look at your garden, Tyson. I think it sounds to me like it's really good. Maybe you could send us some photographs. What you've asked for this week is a good question. Can I please plant a grapefruit tree in the ground or wine barrels, pots, or somewhere else? Could you please give me some tips and advice? So we were just talking about it with Rowan about always try and get a dwarf tree if you can. Grapefruit trees can actually be quite large, and that's because they do support very large fruit, as a general comment. And so what you really want to do is you want to make sure you've got as much soil as you can. If you've got a dwarf tree, brilliant. If you've got a normal tree, then give it a bit of room. It will grow and it'll produce a lot of fruit, but I would prefer to grow them in the ground personally when it comes to grapefruit. So hopefully that helps you, Tyson. Great to have you join us. Jeff and Rita Mapstone from Delaney's Creek in Queensland, you also, you write to us and you contribute to this community enormously, and it's very much appreciated. Your question this week's a good one. How do you know when feijoas are ready to eat? And it's a really simple one. So feijoas are that unusual oblong dark green fruit. As soon as they start to go light, as soon as they get a little soft on the outside edge, and as soon as you can smell that unique aroma of the fruit, and it is a really very aromatic sort of fragrance that they put out, you know they're ready to pick. And if you pick, let's say you pick half a dozen and you take them into the kitchen, you cut the first one open, you think, no, that could have done with a bit longer, you can always just leave them to sit and they will ripen up naturally anyway. So you want to see them get to full size. You want to see a slight change from the dark green to a lighter green colour. That's probably the most obvious one. And then smell the fruit, and that'll help. Lynn Winstanley, another great supporter of ours. She's in Claremont in WA. Hello, Lynn. My daughter has just had a very large tree removed from her double view backyard, which was causing problems with paving, and the lawn wasn't growing. What is the best way for her to encourage the lawn to cover, but also to remove the weeds, which are starting to pop up? She's got cooch. Okay, so cooch is a fast-running, quite a deep-rooted sort of lawn. You want to feed it. You just need to feed it. And right now, you've probably got your last chance to really get some good growth going. Now, there is a product that the guys from Trevor produce. You'll find it in good garden centres. It's called Ferto Lawn. And I would be using that. And it's going to give it a nice steady feed through the winter months. You're probably going to have to control the weeds this year with a selective herbicide. Next year, hopefully the lawn's thick because you've been feeding it consistently through the growing season, and it'll smother those weeds out. Hopefully that helps. Tahani's just come back. What's the best time to try grafting a Maya lemon onto my orange tree? Well, actually not about now, it's about November, just as a general rule, because that's when the trees are growing. And as they're producing fruit, they're going to slow down through the winter months, and you can transplant them this time of the year, but grafting later in the year when you're actually going to get some growth from that bud. And hopefully that helps. Olia Feshuk, I hope I got that right, Olia, would love to have a huge tree removed. Unfortunately, the cost makes it impossible. Look, the trouble with huge trees is that they do cost a lot of money to remove. They're big for a start, so there's a fair amount of risk for a tree pruner to take them out. And there's also the risk of something happening when they do. So moving that timber away, that can be a bit of a problem, or can be a risk for hazards, and also root systems as you're trying to get them out. So I think please be a little conscious that whilst they're expensive, more often than not, getting a professional tree pruner in to remove a tree is a good investment. Helen Herford, you're in Melbourne in Adelaide. Hello, Helen. The earwigs just will not disappear after many months of spraying. Is there a natural product I can throw around the garden? Interestingly enough, earwigs are an insect and they are quite challenging to move on. I don't know what you've been spraying, but you're going to need to use carbaryl if you want to get control of them. It'll only be one spray, and it's a very effective way to break up the earwig populations. But carbaryl, you'll find it probably in your local Mitre 10 store. They still sell that product, as a general comment. Nicole Bagium in Melbourne, with my orange tree leaves are becoming yellow and my citrus are becoming curly. Okay, I think we've got a bit of an issue of citrus are really a very vigorous tree. They grow like crazy, and they produce a huge amount of fruit, and they become quite problematic if they're not continuously fed. And this is kind of why feeding is really important, and it becomes most obvious as you're going into the winter as they're delivering crops. And so the trick here is really to make sure that you are feeding, and you're feeding with a very good fertilizer. I've got a story that we've done for the Garden Gurus, and talks about some citrus in my garden. Now, I've actually been feeding with the citrus fertilizer, and we're not getting a change in the look of that foliage. So I've done a pH test, and it turns out that the soil is actually quite acidic. And if you're on one extreme or the other, you tend to find that some of those greening elements, iron, nitrogen, magnesium, manganese, they're not available to the plant. They become unavailable. They're in the soil, but the plant can't take it up. So the best way to make sure that you're buffering that soil, the pH, so you neutralize it as much as you can, is to be putting a nice thick layer of a really well composted organic compost. So hopefully that helps a little bit. And the curly is being caused by citrus leaf miner, I am quite certain, which is an insect. It's easily treated using white oil or pest oil or one of those horticultural oils, and you apply it very late in the day. So ideally around about 4:30, 5 o'clock, before it gets dark. The moths are very active around that period of time. Spray it over the foliage. They won't land on the foliage. They don't like the stickiness of the oil, and they'll go somewhere else. Then you'll see that the new foliage is not being damaged at all. Margaret Campion, hello, you're from Belgrave. It's great to have you join us this morning, Margaret. This is a really interesting one. Margaret's asked about Daphne bushes. Now, Daphne is a fantastic plant. The fragrance is just sensational. You've said what causes healthy Daphne bushes to die? I think that's what you're asking me. Do they get wet feet? Now, I'm not sure about the wet feet, because the wet feet is a saturation of the soil, and they do like to have free draining soils. In fact, the best Daphnes I've ever seen are those heaven sent varieties, and grown in pots. They love a pot environment. So a nice big pot, you'll end up with a nice big Daphne bush. If you have a heavy soil, then trying to break that up by punching some holes in the ground with a hollow tube, and then putting a little bit of gypsum into those holes will help improve the soil structure. Still not going to stop it if it's just saturated. The biggest problem with Daphne is that the old-fashioned varieties of Daphne get viruses, and that causes them to die. So it could be a root rot. More likely, it's probably one of those old-fashioned varieties of Daphne that they just have this viral build-up in them, and they slowly slow down. You'll see them dropping leaves, and then they basically end up looking like they've just got the little buds about to burst, and sooner or later they actually die. The good news is that you can get these modern varieties, like I said, that beautiful one from Anthony Tesla International. And of course, that particular one is a really good one when it comes to no viral load. So you end up with lots of foliage and lots of flower. And there's a white and a pink, and they're absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, hopefully you can get your hands on those. All right, let's keep rolling along. Maz, you're in Ipswich. Hello, Maz. You join us just about every single week. It's great to have you do that. Thank you. I just wondering why my Rosella has pink as well as yellow flowers on the same bush. So that's not an unusual thing with Rosella. Rosella is actually a hibiscus, believe it or not, and we typically grow it because we're growing it for the flowers themselves. But they do have variation in the flowers, and the same bush can have that variation as well. So I suspect that that's all it is. It's certainly not anything wrong with the plant. It's just the plant being completely unique. That's all it is. Olia, you're in Melbourne, and you've asked about grapefruit. You said your grapefruit's got black spot. Now, I'll guarantee you it doesn't have black spot because it's very unusual for any citrus to get that kind of problem. However, I suspect what you do have is you have sooty mold. And sooty mold spread around by scale, and scale are farmed by ants. And what you probably need to do is get control of the scale. So we're just talking about horticultural oils, whether it be eco oil or pest oil or just white oil. A really good spray, a really good soaking all over the foliage, underneath and on top, and the stems as well. You probably only need one spray if you've got 2 or 3 days afterwards of nice dry weather, and you'll take control. So I would do that. When the scale's gone, the ants lose interest, and the black thing you're seeing in sooty mold will disappear because it runs out of food, which is a byproduct of the relationship between the ants and the scale in this symbiotic relationship. So yes, hopefully that helps. Margaret Campion, you're in Belgrave, of course. My tulips didn't reappear last year, no sign of them this year. Can you give me advice on as to why? Probably not cold enough, Margaret. Also, digging your bulbs is a very good thing, and probably as soon as your flowers are finished and you see that, I'd go and cut that flower bud off as soon as it's finished. Encourage as much goodness to go into that root. As soon as you see some yellowing of the foliage about November, December, I would dig them and let them sit dry in a nice, cool, dry spot, and then replant them. I'd suggest you start again, Margaret. Sorry, that's not necessarily the news you wanted to hear, but it sounds to me like they're probably just not happy in the spot we've got them. Kiki, you are joining us from coastal New South Wales. We're all over the country. That's the great thing about this. In fact, we get people joining us from all over the world, which is even better again. Now, Kiki, your question. Recently put some seed and feed down and have some patches still. My lawn's buffalo. Any care tips during the season? Look, to be quite honest, what you've done here, I think this is this oversowing of a lawn seed variety that's going to fill in any gaps. Really good for you to do this, because if you've got an active lawn growing in that space, even if it's an annual, something like a perennial rye or an annual rye or one of those more common lawn seeds, what you're doing is you're filling in the gap, and that's just increasing the competition for weeds, basically putting everything in your favour. And what happens, of course, it fills it during the winter. Come springtime, you mow, and eventually those other grasses disappear, and your buffalo, in this particular case, will spread across the top and cover those patches. So that's my advice. I think it's still, if you're in coastal central New South Wales, still worth feeding right now. I would suggest you give your lawn a good feed as well. Won't hurt at all. Nikki Probert, actually, just on lawns, did you know that 75% of us underfeed our lawns? Underfeed, 75%. So every 3 months, if you're using a controlled or slow release fertilizer, you should be applying more. And if you're doing that, so it's 4 applications a year, the results you'll get will be fantastic. Just a bit of advice. Nikki Probert, you're in Tassie. Thanks so much for joining us. You've got an extensive kiwi fruit vine. Half your luck. Can can I please tell you when they should be ripe, and if they ripen on the vine? They will definitely ripen on the vine. It sounds like they're still quite hard from what you're telling us. What I would do is I'd leave them. The leaves should pretty much fall off the vine, and the fruit will still be there. And that's about the time that it's ready to be harvested. But again, just feel it. It should be firm, but you'll feel a lot softer. You will feel there's a softening in it, and that's when you start picking them on a regular basis. You're just picking a little early at the moment, I think, Nikki, so just be a little bit more patient. Once all that foliage is dropped, you can see the fruit clearly, then that's the time to go. So hopefully that helps. All right, Albert Intan, you are in East Cannington over here in WA, volunteered. You're a volunteer for the tulip bulb planting at Araluen Botanic Gardens. You did it last year, and they allocated 2 bulbs for each hole dug. I don't know whether that's okay to put 2 bulbs in a hole or any kind of bulb for a more impressive and more impactful display. Does it only apply to tulips? And apart from that, if there's 2 bulbs this is a big question, 2 bulbs in a hole, don't the roots compete for nutrients? Well, the answer is, Albert, you are 100% right. They will compete for nutrients. Funny thing about bulbs, they kind of like that root competition. So it's not such a bad thing. It's quite a clever strategy and something that Araluen do very well with regards to particularly their tulips. But most bulbs are the same. And you'll find that 2 or even 3 in a hole together, they will produce a cluster of flowers for you for a start. So the impact of the display is fantastic. But more importantly, what's going on after that? Well, once those plants have started to die down, the flowers are finished, cut those seed heads off so the goodness goes back down into the bulb, and then dig them. Dig them in around about November, December. Hopefully it's been cold enough during the winter. Here in Perth, it's not quite as cold as it should be, certainly for tulips. The chill factor is not great. The bulb flower sets in November, so that's why you would dig after that period of time. Then let them sit and dry for maybe 3 months. So maybe the end of March, early April, you would probably take them and start to look at doing something and getting them back into some soil, and they'll start to get growing again, and you'll get an early season flower if everything's fine. There is a bit of a trick, and that is if you dig them a little bit early and you put them in the crisper at about 1, 2, 3, 4 degrees maximum and leave them there for a month, but you have to do it in November, they will produce a new flower inside that bulb. But if you do it later, it actually doesn't make any difference at all. So it's a bit of a fallacy. I think we've been talking about that for the last few weeks. Tony Di Ludovico, I hope I got that right, Tony. You're in Melbourne. You've got a black pine and you want to remove it from the ground and give it a good root prune. When's the best time to do it? Okay, well, interestingly enough, they do transplant really well, and I suspect you're doing this purely for bonsai purposes, which is a smart move. They make great bonsais, and they can be quite large plants growing in the ground and then root prune just to ensure you're containing that root system. So, when? Wintertime is the best time to do it. That's the simple answer. So about now, as you're moving into the cooler season, that's when they're not growing as fast, so shock is a lot less. I'd be using some sea salt just to make sure that the transplant and the root pruning isn't too damaging to the plant, and you should be fine. Let's keep rolling along. Okay, Mary Playford, you're in Adelaide. Tell me something about tulips again, to be sure. Can I put them in without chilling? Yes, absolutely, Mary. Just what we were saying before, it's a bit of a fallacy, or it's just one of those things that have been spread, a myth over the years. It is not necessary for you to put them into the chiller or crisper. It doesn't make any difference. The bulb flower is already set. So, June LaFrance. Hello, June. You join us each week, and it's very much appreciated as well. You're in New South Wales, in Vincentia. How do you stop curl grubs getting into outdoor pot plants? All right, that's interesting. So curl grubs are the result of a moth, and the moth is active in the evening. If you've got any external lights on at night, they will be attracted to that light. They'll tend to drop. They'll go into the lawn, or they'll go into the pots below, and that's where they'll lay their eggs, and that's when the grubs suddenly start appearing. There are some things that you can soak the pots with as far as insecticides go if you really want to get control of it. So hopefully that is that's going to help you a little bit. All right, Vita Fu. Let's have a look. You have got citrus. You wanted to know what the best fertilizer is. Lemon, kaffir lime, and calamansi. I think that's calamondin. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, Vita. The truth of the matter is the best fertilizer, best time to feed is about now with a controlled release, because as they finish their fruiting, they need a boost. They need the nutrient level in the soil to be replenished. So you're doing the right thing to be jumping in there. Now, I would be suggesting that you use a specialised fruit fertiliser, and there is that Trevor fruit and citrus fertiliser, and it's I might have one around somewhere. No, maybe not. But it is a really good way to feed over a long period of time, and it's a controlled release fertilizer too. So, from my point of view, one of the best that you can get, I think. So that should help. All right, let's keep rolling along. Sue Morris, you didn't tell us where you're from. Why are my crepe myrtles not flowering? They're 4 years old. Probably two reasons, I would suspect, Sue. One is they're in shade. Two is that you are giving them too much water and too much fertilizer, and particularly high nitrogen fertilizers. They put on growth, but they just don't produce flowers because they're feeling pretty comfortable, and they're going to expend all their energy into getting a structure and framework. I suspect that's what it is. Okay, Gene Hobbs is in Melbourne. My husband thinks he's found a truffle under a rhubarb bush. Okay, we had a look at the photo. I've got bad news, Gene. Tell your husband it's not. It is one of those unusual growths that comes with rhubarb, and I have them on mine as well. Are we putting a photo up on that one? Yep. So there you can see it. Oh, sorry. It does look a bit like a truffle, but not on the inside. So just so you know. But Gene, it's not, and it's not edible. So don't go doing anything with it. Get rid of it. And sorry, your husband's going to be disappointed. Colin Cardo, now you've just bought, I'm not sure where you're from, Colin, but you bought a Madagascar palm. Now, Madagascar palms are also known as cane palms, and the golden cane palm is the one that we all know the most. This one is a 25 centimetre pot. Like to get a nice big pot for it. The one you found is 30 centimetres high by 60 centimetre diameter in a bowl shape. I think it will be. I think it'll be, you're asking if it's going to be big enough for the plant. My suggestion would be that a deeper pot would be probably more ideal, but 30 centimetres deep, we're talking about that deep, it'll grow, it'll run out of food at some point fairly quickly. So a deeper pot would be the ideal scenario. Nikki Probert's from Tassie's come back just to tell us a little bit more about her property. Half of it is an orchard. You've got cherries, apricots, kiwi fruit, apples, nashies, grapes, two types of plums, feijoa, and something you call a clementine, which is a type of European mandarin. Summertime is the best time for those. Unfortunately, they all nearly seem to have a variety of disease. Is there something systemic that I should feed them? You should be feeding them. That's probably the first thing. All the deciduous are not going to, there's no benefit in feeding them now. They're not going to get any benefit at all. Anything that is evergreen, that's a different story. You can give them a bit of a feed. Now, won't do an awful lot. The best time for these guys to get them growing strongly and to combat whatever this disease is that's going on is generally during the summer months. So as soon as the weather warms, that's when all of these guys are going to be growing. That's when they're going to be hungry. So around about September, October, November, maybe in Tassie, is when you want to be feeding them. And I would be feeding them I'd probably be using something like Dynamic Lifter, to be quite honest, initially to give them a real boost, and then use a controlled form after that. All right. Desiree blows. I'm not sure where you're from, Desiree, but got a locust tree. It's borne no fruit. It's 4 to 5 years old. Is there a reason? Do I feed it with seaweed spray? Well, seaweed spray is not going to do anything for it at all, really, probably other than protect it probably from frosts. But what you should be looking at is something that is a high K fertilizer, so a high potassium-based fertilizer. That's typically the formula that you will get when you're getting a specialized fruit fertilizer like the citrus and fruit fertilizer from Trevor. That's probably what I would be giving, I think, at this moment in time. Your lemons are big and yellow, but they've got a couple of green spots on them. How will I know when it's the right time to pick the lemons? They're just going to get big and yellow, and eventually they're going to fall off. So the green spots are probably scale. They tend to get on the fruit and they cause a little bit of a spot on the fruit, but generally it's not too much of a problem. So my suggestion would be that you just be patient. Sandra, that's Sandra Belv in Brisbane, so hopefully that helps you. Dot Downey's in New South Wales. The azaleas have got brown leaves on it. I was wondering, what do I spray with? Right, now that could be, that sounds to me like it's one of two things. It's either azalea lace bug, which is pretty bad this year in my garden, and red spider mite. That's the other one that can cause those problems too. So my suggestion would be that you get a systemic insecticide, or you jump on the website, you find the good bug company, and you get some good bugs to come in. Now, generally they're predatory mite. They'll come through and they'll take out thrips and other mites. So hopefully that helps. Jody Wilson, New Mexico and New South Wales. Hello. I'm going to repot my water lilies soon, but the root system's gone into overdrive. It's taking up most of my pond. Can I cut them back a lot so they fit back into a pot again? Yes, you can. You can be quite brutal, actually, Jody. I certainly am with mine. I probably take 50 to 70% of the root system off, repot them into a good soil. So a potting mix is fine. Then some stones on top, and then back in, but clean all the old roots out, because they will rot and you don't want that putrefying the water. So a little bit of advice there. Donna Seed, can I successfully grow a kiwi vine in the southwest of West Australia? You can grow them from Perth all the way back. They really do grow quite well. The kiwi fruit vine, just so you know, they are really quite an interesting plant. You need a male and a female. And it's all about aligning when the flowers are produced. Some produce flowers in the morning, some produce flowers in the afternoon. So get yourself a male and female. They're very clever with how they market them in garden centres. Typically, the boys are in blue pots and the girls are in pink. So it just makes it nice and easy when it comes to selecting your kiwi fruit. But they will grow really well in the southwest of WA, just to support that. Mary Playford, we're getting a lot of you coming back, and I'll try and answer your questions once, but I do want to make sure everybody else gets their questions answered as well. So some of these we may come back to you later on. But Mary, you've asked, we call caltrops as corner jack, and I know that they're slightly different from the other. I was wondering, besides pulling them, how do you recommend control them? Best thing with caltrops is just to actually smother them out. So a bit of newspaper and a pile of mulch on top, and if you do that maybe 2 years in a row, you'll find they disappear. They don't like that at all. Tanya Hughes is in Ballarat in Victoria. I've just bought some raised garden beds. I thought I'd plant some vegetables: carrot, broccoli, spring onion, maybe a tomato. I was wondering if I can plant some annuals like pansies or marigolds with them for some colour. Absolutely, you can. One word of advice, Tanya: no tomatoes. Okay, tomatoes are a summer crop. Definitely don't plant them now. You will get growth. More often than not, they will grow, but they won't produce. They won't actually produce any fruit. So, and if they do, it'll be green. That won't ripen properly. So, my suggestion is that you do all the others. They will all do well. Obviously, this time of the year is a really good time for brassicas. So, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, they're all good. Pansies and marigolds, fantastic. Calendulas are another one that you can use really well in the garden beds. And mixing those in amongst your edibles is a good idea when you're looking for pollination. So if you do need any pollinators in there because it's something that's producing a fruit, then that's putting those in is a good way to go. Jane Steltari, I hope I got that right, from Westminster in WA. Hi, Jane. My African box hedge is dying in spots. What am I doing wrong? Probably dry spots in the soil. Even though we've had a pretty wet period of time here in WA, you've got dry spots. You'll see it reflected in the foliage of the box hedge. So wetting agent is a good way to go, and you can get one from Seasol that you mix in a watering can and drench the ground, and then get the hose out and really wash it in. You should see it bubbling up. As soon as you see that bubbling up, you're clearing out those air pockets in the soil. It means water can flow evenly down and your plants will start to recover. Probably trimming a little bit of the dead stuff out of the hedges will be very beneficial, but I doubt very much it's a disease. It's more an issue related to what's going on at the moment within your soil. All right, let's have a look here. Now, Mandy Farrell in Yeppoon in Queensland, you've sent us some photos. Let's have a look at this. Oh, maybe we can, maybe we can't. How are we going there? Oh, there we go. All right, this is really interesting. I didn't know where you were from initially with your question, but and I have a very similar problem because I live in a slightly cooler environment. During the summer, it can be quite challenging. And the frangipanis, you said, have not flowered this season, and the branches are looking like shriveled at the end. Now, this is a disease, actually, so it's something you need to treat with a copper-based spray, but this is called anthracnose, and it gets things like a lot of the tropical plants, things like mangoes, and you'll see a similar sort of situation, and it causes this kind of cankerish kind of effect on the plant. So spraying with something like a copper-based spray, and liquid copper is one thing you could use. It will do the job, but more often than not, it's a case of just getting a specialised canker spray. And so you'll find that they come under many different names. The one that I use quite regularly for mine is called Coside. If you can clean that canker off, which is, as I said, it's a bacterial infection, it'll do it the world of good, and you'll see your plants recover quite quickly. Anna Kramer, you are in Sydney. My Calathea zebrina leaves are turning brown around the leaf edges. What's the best soil, watering, fertiliser and weather conditions? Okay, I can almost tell you what I think is causing the problem, and it's too much water. Repotting this plant at the moment would do it the world of good. Get yourself a really good quality potting mix. So you want something like Osmocote Premium, the professional blend. It's in a blue bag. You could do that. If you've got it indoors, you could also go for that Osmocote indoor mix. Now, the good thing about that one is there are no organics in there, so you don't end up bringing fungus gnats in, so you don't end up with black flies in your Chardonnay, which is a pretty frustrating thing when you've got indoor plants everywhere. So repotting is a really good thing. Watering is generally about 2 cups of water a week. And if you've got them in a self-watering pot that's got a little reservoir in the bottom, it's even better. Fertilising, controlled release fertiliser, really important that you're using something like that Troforte product that we talk about all the time. It does goodness in the soil, but most importantly, it releases nutrients slowly. And weather conditions, well, it should be inside. So if it's outside, cold is not going to be very good for it. They are a tropical plant. So again, keep it in a pot, bring it in and out, and protect it. As long as it's got bright light, it'll do really well. Calatheas are a very popular, very hardy indoor plant. Wow, we are belting along. We've got a couple of questions coming from not far from where I live, actually, in the Perth Hills. Les Murdy. Julie Callaghan's asked about her wattle tree dying. She's not sure why. Would love to have a look at it, Julie. I suspect it's an older tree. Wattles tend to have 7 to 12 years of life before they start dying off and they get all woody and so on. So in our area, that's probably what's going on here. Lynette Cox is also in Les Murdy, so we'll do two in my home district town. My avocado's got a large spot on the trunk, about 20 cent piece size, with brown sugary spot coming out of it. I would say that you've got some sunburn, I would think, more than likely on there, or some kind of bruising, and that's the sap's now coming out because the bark's been damaged. There's a couple of things you can do. You can actually get a copper base, almost like a poultice. So you create a paste and you just paint that over the top. Now it's typically from something called copper oxychloride. So it's the same stuff that we use to treat grapes and so on. You can get it in garden centres, and you will find this in your local Mitre 10 store in town in Kalamunda. So pop in there and grab grab that that copper oxychloride. It's the best thing to do. Do a little poultice over the patch. It'll help seal it off and stop it from spreading. That's all you really want to do. It's not really a bacteria or anything else that's causing the problem. Okay, Michelle Coffey, let's go all the way back across the country to the north, so Brisbane North. Michelle, you have sent us some photos in. This photo's in the middle. Hi, can somebody let me know why my gardenia is going like this? How many of you have got gardenias and how many of your gardenias are looking like this? This happens at the end of summer as we go into cold conditions. Some nutrients start to get locked up in the soil. And as the plant tries to produce new growth, when it realizes it doesn't have enough of some of those key elements, in this case iron and magnesium, it starts dropping leaves. So you'll see leaves go yellow and new foliage comes out. It's got yellow veins through it. So that problem is quite a common thing this time of the year, and people will be seeing it everywhere. The solution, high iron-based fertilizer. Probably, to be quite honest, it wouldn't hurt to use something like iron sulfate and wash it into the soil really thoroughly, and that'll get you a great result. We've got about 6 minutes to go, so we're going to try and get through some questions, but I do want to show you my plant of the week, which I've held off. Let's have a look at Jeanette Abbott. Back over here on the other side of the country again, in Perth. Please can you advise on suitable slender trees that have non-invasive roots to tolerate sun for our garden in Perth? They're going to go against a limestone wall in our front yard, maybe a height of 4 metres. Probably one of the upright forms of the deciduous plums, and there's a number of them. They're very upright and more columnar than they are conical. So they're probably the ideal scenario because their root system's not that invasive. And if you're going up against a limestone wall, there are a lot of plants that don't like the alkaline from the limestone. So these guys generally will tolerate it quite well. And 4 metres is typically their height. Hopefully that helps. My plant of the week. All right, I showed you the photo of it before. That's me under there. And this is a really important plant if you are worried about your health, gentlemen. And the reason I say that is because it's known as the tree tomato. It's known as the tree tomato because it is actually from the same genus as tomatoes. This is the tree tomato or the tamarillo. They grow really well in my backyard. We've got fruit everywhere at the moment. And it is delicious. It's very different. It is a savoury fruit, not a sweet fruit. So it's not for everybody, but it is absolutely sensational when it's cut up fresh and served with a platter of cheese and biscuits and things like that. It's a really fantastic thing. This is what it looks like on the inside. You can see that's the outside. And on the inside, there we go. You can see it's very much like a tomato. And it's really sensational. It really is fantastic. It makes the most amazing pastes as well. So if you're into some of those dips and pastes with your cheese platters and so on before you have dinner, they are fantastic to grow. They're called tamarillos. Small tree, maximum 3 metres probably, with a spread of about 2. And my 4-year or 5-year-old tree that my mate Katie gave me, that probably has the best part of 200 or 300 fruit on it at the moment. It's really cool. There's one other fruit I wanted to show you. It's this one here. So you can see that there. Very seasonal. This is one of my favorites, and I don't know whether you can see the juice there, but it's sort of, I've cut it, and I've cut it for a reason. I wanted to show you. This is the pomegranate, and really good fruit for dry climates because they can tolerate that really, really well. I've probably done this the wrong way, but when you cut them, so you do 3 cuts across the top like that, and then you segment it after that off those cuts, and that is what the fruit looks like. So you can see it there. And the fruit is actually these little tiny seeds. It's a little seed in each one. It's sweet, and in both instances, these fruit, and the reason why I had 2 of them to show you today, are very, very high in antioxidants. And antioxidants, in particular with the tamarillo related to tomatoes, very high in lycopene. Lycopene is very important in men's diets. So we know now that about 40 to 50 grams of lycopene in the form of a fresh tomato per day reduces your risk of prostate disease and cancer by about 70 to 80%. It's phenomenal. Simply adding something into your diet can make such a big difference, but it does. And so when you've got things like tamarillos, they're coming in when the tomato season's finished. So growing them at home and then coming up with those things is really good. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. The pomegranate's the same. Very high source of antioxidants, incredibly good for a lot of different things, including heart and also eyesight. So 2 fruit out of my garden that you should try, I would suggest growing at home yourself. They really are very good for you, easy to grow, and most importantly, they, I suppose, just look great this time of the year. Now, we're going to take some more questions, and Shaylee is on fire. She anticipated what I was going to do. I'm going to do 3 more, I think. Sandra Gould, you're in Bateau Bay in central New South Wales. My lawn is covered in paspalum. What do I need to get rid of it? You'll need a selective herbicide. Paspalum can be taken out, but it does require there's a few different types. I would probably go to a agricultural supply company ahead of a garden centre in this case, although garden centres often will sell selective herbicides. Whatever's most convenient for you, I would go to one of those 2. They will have selective herbicide designed to take out paspalum but leave the existing grass variety. So they do exist, just so you know. Vivian Tice, you're in Goulburn in New South Wales. How do you look after banana passion fruit? My vine keeps dying no matter what I do. Okay, really good question. Banana passion fruit is a cool climate passion fruit. So Passiflora mollissima, it is a really interesting, beautiful flowering plant, and it should be producing flowers about now. It hates really hot, dry weather. So if you've had it during the summer months and you've seen it slowly deteriorating, it's probably because it just doesn't like that. What you can do is you can offset it. It's got a very shallow root system, so a big layer of mulch about that thick, so 100, 150 mils thick, during the summer months will keep the soil temperature moderated and help the plant get through. But it should start to grow now, so now's a good time to be feeding it. They are a cool climate passion fruit, unlike most of the other ones that we would normally grow. Mark Shoal, you're in Enfield in South Australia. We had a lot of questions from SA this week, which is great, and Tassie, so thanks so much for joining us. We've got a 52-year-old elkhorn, which I was fertilising with Thrive, could not find anymore. I'm not sure why, because I think Thrive's still available. You brought sea salt. Is this okay for elkhorns? So don't want to kill it. Now, sea salt's not a fertiliser. Sea salt is a soil tonic. It's a plant tonic. It helps plants tolerate generally extremes, cold, heat, root stress. It's fantastic for that, but it's not a plant food. So what do you feed it with? You could use something like power feed. This is one of those plants. So elkhorns are actually a fern, and ferns love fish emulsion. So Charlie Carp or one of those fish emulsions, really good, really, really good, Mark. That'll help. And, just treat it as a liquid fertiliser. Does make the world of good. I was talking to my mate Ian from the local butcher yesterday, and he was telling me that he uses it all over his garden. He said we do smell like a fish factory for a short period of time after applying it, but the plants are really good. Okay, let's keep moving. Can I use pine needles as mulch on my garden? This is Mark Rule. Yes, you can, absolutely. Pine needles are acidic. Just be conscious that if your soil's already acidic, that you could start to actually really change the pH. So a little pH test before would be really good. Oh dear, and Lynette Cox said a funny joke. Parrots and rats must have the healthiest prostates in Lesmurdy. I think she's talking about the eating of fruit. Now in Lesmurdy and Kalamunda, we do have a lot of rats active in the neighbourhood, and they tend to get to our fruit. So I think that's what she's talking about. I should tell you, and I forgot to mention this, but during the week we had a bit of an unfortunate incident. We mixed up, meant to be harvesting some onions, and actually mixed up daffodil bulbs in there, and daffodil bulbs are extremely toxic. So ended up in hospital, and I wasn't sure how long I was going to be in. The doctor told me what he thought it was. And so I asked him, how long do you think I'm going to be in? He says, well, I'm not 100% sure, but I am sure that you'll be out in springtime. Talk about bad jokes. Sorry, that was a joke. The competition draw. This week's lucky winner of the $50 gift voucher from Garden Express is, I think I'm going to say it's Margaret Campion from Belgrave. Margaret, good question with Daphnes. And this some of these old-fashioned varieties with their deterioration, you do notice at this time of the year, bringing in these new varieties that are virus indexed and tested to make sure they don't have any virus in them, just delivers you a better plant. Really good. For those of you who are wondering about the Trevor Forte Facebook page competition, go over to their Facebook page, like it, share it with your friends, and then put in this week's code word, which is sunlight. Thank you very much, Shaylee. You put it up on the screen as well. Sunlight. That is our code word for the week. Wow. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. Time has flown. It's 10:04. It's Friday. We're all about to head into an amazing weekend. I'm spending the day with Costa from Gardening Australia tomorrow. We're out at the Core Cider House, and Costa's going to be sharing his wisdom, and I'm going to give him a little bit of a local knowledge backup as he does his talks for the Kalamunda Garden Festival. They're having a very special event, which is pretty cool to see that little legend of a fella from the ABC coming across to the west. It's great to catch up with Costa again. For all of you whose questions came through today that I didn't get to, we will be back next week. We've got another live show. I will be based back here in Perth next week, and probably the week after somewhere else. But this next week I will be here. I will be answering your questions live, which is a really important thing. Remember, you can always jump onto our website if you're looking for more information. If you want to ask a question, check out our Facebook page. Or if you want to see some of the stories from some of our programs, then YouTube channel, thegardengurus.tv. It's always a good way to go. And of course, tomorrow we've got another episode of the Garden Gurus TV show. And it's an exciting episode. There's actually some really cool stories in there. You will love them. You might even see my Tamarillo tree in there. You never know. So make sure you tune in to episode 9 of the Garden Gurus. We're almost at the end of the autumn series, so don't miss us. We're having a lot of fun with the show, and I hope you enjoy it. And if you miss, like a lot of people last week tuned in to how often do you have a king crowned? Well, last week it happened. We happened to be up against it. Bit of a tough gig. If you missed last week's show and you want to see it, or maybe you just don't have the time tomorrow at the right time to watch the Garden Gurus, then check out 9now.com.au. You can watch all of the shows from the whole series back through live or on demand, I should say, as you want to watch them via 9now.com.au. What a program. I hope you enjoyed the advice. I love spending time with you and sharing your stories and my stories and discovering things that sometimes I didn't know, and more often than not, sharing my advice and knowledge with you. So we really appreciate you coming in and joining us each Friday morning. It is a bit different this week. We were later last week, but we're back to the normal times, and we will see you next week. I'm Trevor Cochrane. Thanks very much, Shaylee, for all your work. Folks, we'll see you next week for another shot here at the Garden Gurus Live.